The cargo ship Endurance drifted through the empty space between stars. Captain Yuna sat in her chair on the bridge, watching the darkness outside. She was a small woman with tired eyes and hands that had seen too much work. Her ship was old. Her crew was small. They carried medicine and food to the outer colonies. And they had done this job for 15 years. It was a quiet night when the signal came. The communication officer, a young man named Minho, looked up from his screen with confusion on his face. "Captain, we are receiving a distress signal, but something is wrong with it." Yuna walked over to his station. "What do you mean?" "The signal is old. Very old. The timestamp says it was sent 226 years ago." Yuna felt a chill run down her spine. A signal that old should have faded into nothing long ago. But here it was, repeating over and over, crying out for help across the centuries. "Where is it coming from?" she asked. "A star system called Velith. It is far from any human world. The species that sent it. They are called the Corvani." Yuna had never heard of them. She ordered her crew to investigate. What they found in the old data archives changed everything. 200 years ago, humanity was young and weak. They had only just learned to travel between stars. Their first great colony ship, the New Dawn, carried 12,000 people toward a new home. But the engines failed. The ship drifted in the void, and everyone aboard was going to die. Then a strange vessel appeared. It belonged to the Corvani, a species that lived far from human space. They did not speak the same language. They did not look anything like humans. But they understood that the people on the New Dawn needed help. The Corvani saved all 12,000 colonists. They repaired the ship. They gave them food and fuel. And when the humans asked what they owed, the Corvani said nothing. They simply helped, and then they flew away into the darkness. Humanity never forgot. The story of the Corvani became a legend, told to children on every human world. But as the years passed, people stopped believing it was real. The Corvani became a myth, a fairy tale about kind aliens who asked for nothing in return. Now, Yuna understood that the legend was true. She ordered her crew to follow the old signal. The journey took 3 weeks. When the Endurance finally arrived at the Velith system, Yuna looked out the window and felt her heart break. The Corvani star was dying. A massive creature of pure darkness wrapped around it like a snake around its prey. The crew called it the Hollow. It was eating the star, draining its light and heat. The planets of the system were growing cold. And on the third planet, Velith Prime, the Corvani people were dying with their sun. Yuna sent probes to the planet's surface. What she saw made her want to cry. The Corvani had once been a great civilization. Their cities had covered the world. They had art and music and science. But now their cities were dark and frozen. Their population had fallen from 8 billion to less than 40 million. The survivors huddled together in the last warm places on their world, waiting for the end. And the worst part was that they had asked for help. For 200 years, the Corvani had sent signals to the Galactic Concord, the great alliance of elder races that ruled the known galaxy. They begged for assistance. They offered everything they had. But the elder races looked at the Corvani and saw a small, weak species with nothing valuable to offer. The Concord said no. The Corvani were not worth saving. Yuna sat alone in her cabin that night. She thought about the ancestors who had floated helpless in the void. She thought about the Corvani ship that had appeared out of nowhere to save them. She thought about all the humans alive today who existed because of that one act of kindness. And she made a decision. She recorded everything her ship had found. Every piece of data. Every image of the dying world. Every record of the Concord refusing to help. Then she sent it all to Earth. The message traveled across the stars at the speed of light. It reached Earth in 11 days. The government received it first, but they could not keep it secret. Within hours, the story spread to every human world. People watched the recordings of the frozen Corvani cities. They read the ancient records of the New Dawn rescue. They learned that the species who had saved their ancestors was now dying, abandoned by a galaxy that did not care. And humanity responded. Not the politicians. Not the military. The people themselves. Ordinary humans on 100 different worlds looked at what the Corvani had done for them, and they felt something stir in their hearts. It was anger. It was gratitude. It was a feeling that had no name but demanded action. Messages flooded the networks. Volunteers signed up by the millions. Ship captains offered their vessels. Engineers abandoned their jobs. Scientists packed their equipment. Soldiers came out of retirement. The signal spread like fire through dry grass. 3 words, repeated everywhere. In every language humanity spoke. We remember them. Yuna watched the response from her small ship, and for the first time in many years, she cried. But these were not tears of sadness. They were tears of pride. Humanity was coming, and they would repay the debt that had waited 200 years. Horizon Station floated above Earth like a metal flower. It was the largest construction platform humanity had ever built. Normally, it made cargo ships and mining vessels. But now it was making something else. It was making an armada. Admiral Taiwu stood at the observation window, watching the ships take shape. He was 78 years old, with white hair and a face full of wrinkles. His hand shook a little when he held things. Most people his age were resting at home with their grandchildren. But Taiwu had no grandchildren. He had lost his only daughter to space pirates 30 years ago. After that, he had dedicated his life to protecting others. When the call came to lead the rescue fleet, he did not hesitate for even 1 second. How many ships do we have now? He asked. His aide, a young woman named Sujin, checked her tablet. 3,412, sir. More are arriving every hour. Taiwu nodded slowly. It was not enough. It would never be enough. But it was what they had. The ships came from everywhere. Military cruisers and cargo freighters. Mining vessels and passenger liners. Private yachts and research stations. Some were new and fast. Some were old and barely holding together. But every single one had a crew that wanted to help. Dr. Yunji arrived on the 3rd day. She was a small woman with thick glasses and messy hair. She studied stars and the strange things that lived between them. When she saw the data about the hollow, she locked herself in her laboratory for 2 days. When she came out, she had a plan. The hollow is a living thing, she explained to the admiral. It feeds on stellar energy, but it is not invincible. If we can create a strong enough gravitational pulse, we can hurt it. Maybe even drive it away. What would that require? Taiwo asked. Every ship we have. Flying directly into the creature. Synchronizing their engines at exactly the same moment. The survival chances? Yunji looked away. 11%. Taiwu was quiet for a long time. Then he said, Tell the crews. Let them decide for themselves. Not a single ship left the fleet. Lieutenant Jisu was one of the youngest pilots in the Armada. She came from a mining colony on a cold, distant moon. Her great-great-grandmother had been a child on the New Dawn when the Corvani rescued it. Jisu had grown up hearing the stories. Now she would be part of the story herself. She walked through the hangar bay of her ship, checking the fighters one by one. Her hands were steady. Her heart was not. Are you scared? Asked her co-pilot, a quiet man named Hyan. Yes, Jisu admitted. But I am more scared of doing nothing. On Earth, Councillor Doyun prepared for the hardest speech of his life. He was humanity's representative to the Galactic Concord, the great alliance of elder races. For years, he had tried to earn their respect. He had been polite and patient and careful. But now he was done being careful. The Concord had sent a warning. Ambassador Vorek of the Dominion, the most powerful of the elder races, had come to Earth personally. He was a tall creature with silver skin and eyes like black glass. His voice was cold when he spoke. Humanity must abandon this foolish mission, Vorek said. The Corvani are nothing. They have no resources, no power, no value. If you go to them, the Concord will impose sanctions. Your trade will suffer. Your colonies will be isolated. Is one dying species worth destroying your own future? Doyan listened to every word. Then he stood up and walked to the window. Outside, he could see the shipyards burning bright with activity. Thousands of humans working day and night to save people they had never met. 200 years ago, Doyan said quietly, our ancestors were dying in the void. They had nothing to offer anyone. They were weak and helpless and alone. But the Corvani came anyway. They did not ask what we were worth. They did not calculate the cost. They simply helped. He turned to face the ambassador. You call this foolishness. We call it grace. And grace is not something humanity forgets. Varek's black eyes narrowed. You will regret this. Perhaps, Doyan said. But I would rather regret trying than regret doing nothing. That night, Doyan gave a speech that was broadcast across the entire galaxy. Trillions of beings watched. As a single human stood before the assembled, representatives of 100 species, and spoke words that would echo through history. The Galactic Concord has decided that the Corvani are not worth saving. We disagree. When humanity was lost in the dark, the Corvani found us and brought us home. We will do the same for them. You may sanction us. You may isolate us. You may call us foolish and reckless and small. But we are going to Valith Prime, and nothing in this galaxy will stop us. The speech ended. The chamber was silent. Then, in the back of the room, a single representative from a minor species began to clap. Then another. Then another. Soon, dozens of beings from forgotten worlds were applauding, their voices rising in support of the small, stubborn species called humanity. The Dominion watched in cold fury. But they could not stop what was coming. 3 days later, the fleet was ready. 3,400 ships hung in space above Earth, waiting for the command. Admiral Taiwu stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking out at the assembled armada. Signal all ships, he said. We leave now. The stars rippled as the fleet jumped to faster than light speed. Humanity was coming to repay a debt 200 years old, and the galaxy would never be the same. The fleet dropped out of faster than light speed at the edge of the Velith system. For a moment, nobody spoke. They just stared at what waited for them. The Corvani star hung in the center of the system, but it was wrong. It was dim and red, where it should have been bright and yellow. And wrapped around it like a blanket of pure night was the hollow. The creature was enormous. It stretched across millions of kilometers. A living shadow that drank the light and gave nothing back. Admiral Taiwu felt his old heart beating fast. In 60 years of military service, he had never seen anything like this. All ships, he said slowly, hold position. Begin scanning. Dr. Yunji worked at her station, her fingers flying across the controls. The data that came back made her face go pale. It is worse than we thought, she said. The hollow is not just feeding. It is preparing to reproduce. If it succeeds, it will create more of itself. They will spread to other systems, other stars. How long do we have? Taiwu asked. Maybe 3 months. Perhaps less. The Admiral closed his eyes for a moment. 3 months to do the impossible. 3 months to save a world. He opened his eyes again. Then we have no time to waste. Send a message to the planet's surface. Tell the Corvani we are here." On Velith Prime, the Corvani had almost given up hope. Their world was cold and dark. Their cities were empty. Their children were dying. For 200 years, they had called out for help, and nobody had answered. Then the human ships appeared in their sky. Elder Grandmother Kath was very old, even by Corvani standards. Her skin was gray and wrinkled, and she moved slowly with the help of a walking stick. She was the last living member of the crew that had rescued the New Dawn so long ago. She had been young then, barely an adult. Now she was ancient, and she had spent her whole life wondering if the humans had ever known what her people did for them. When she heard that human ships had arrived, she thought it was a dream. When they told her how many ships had come, she thought it was a mistake. When she finally saw the fleet with her own eyes, filling the dark sky with lights like new stars, she fell to her knees and wept. A shuttle came down from the flagship. Admiral Taiwu stepped onto Corvani soil, the first human to ever do so. Grandmother Kath was waiting for him, supported by her grandchildren. She looked at him with eyes full of tears. "You came," she whispered. "After all this time. After all these years. You came." Taiwo walked forward and took her frail hands in his. "You saved our people when we had nothing to offer," he said gently. "Did you think we would forget?" "Everyone else forgot," Kath said. "The Concord forgot. The galaxy forgot. We sent messages for so long. Nobody answered." "We answered," Taiwo said. "We are here, and we are not leaving until your world is safe." The meeting between the humans and the Corvani was broadcast to every ship in the fleet. Soldiers and scientists, pilots and engineers. They all watched as the old admiral embraced the old alien woman. Many of them cried. They understood now, truly understood, why they had come so far. But there was no time for celebration. Dr. Yunji presented her plan to the combined leadership. It was dangerous. It was desperate. It might not even work. But it was the only chance they had. "We need to fly into the hollow," she explained. "All of us. Every ship. We will link ourselves together with gravitational tethers. Then, at exactly the right moment, we will fire our engines in synchronization. The combined gravitational pulse should destabilize the hollow's feeding process. It might force it to release the star." A Corvani scientist named Elder Barham studied the data carefully. "The chances of survival are very low," he said. 11%, Yunji admitted. "And if you fail, then your world dies. And the hollow spreads to consume more stars, more worlds, more species." The room was silent. Then Grandmother Kath spoke, her voice stronger than before. "My people will join you," she said. "We still have ships. They are old and weak, but they can fly. We will not let you face this darkness alone." Taiwu shook his head. "You have already given enough. Your people should stay here, where it is safe." "Safe?" Kath laughed, a dry and tired sound. "Our world is dying. There is no safe place for us. But if we must die, let us die fighting beside the people who came to save us." Taiwu looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "Together then." Word of the plan spread through both fleets. The humans and the Corvani would fly into the heart of the hollow together. Most of them would probably die. But they would try anyway, because that was what good people did when the innocent needed help. Lieutenant Jisoo sat in her fighter, preparing for the battle to come. She recorded a message for her family back home. Her voice was calm, but her hands trembled slightly as she spoke. "I do not know if I will come back from this," she said. "But I want you to know that I am not afraid. Well, maybe a little afraid, but mostly I am proud. They told us that humans were small and weak. Maybe that is true. But small things can still matter. And this matters. Saving these people matters. I love you all. And I am proud to be here. I am proud to be human." She ended the recording and closed her eyes. Outside, the hollow waited, vast and dark and hungry. Tomorrow, they would fly into its heart. The fleet moved forward into the darkness. 3,000 human ships and 200 Kovani vessels flew in perfect formation. They were arranged in a sphere, each ship connected to the others by invisible threads of gravitational energy. At the center of the formation was Admiral Taiwu's flagship. At the edges were the smallest fighters, including Lieutenant Jisu's. The hollow grew larger and larger as they approached. Up close, it was not just dark. It was the absence of everything. Looking at it hurt the eyes. It swallowed light and sound and hope. Some crew members had to look away, unable to bear the sight. "Hold formation," Taiwu said calmly. "We knew this would be hard. Stay strong." They crossed the boundary into the hollow's mass. Immediately, everything changed. The darkness pressed against the ships like a living thing. Gravity twisted in impossible directions. Instruments went crazy. Lights flickered. Some ships reported that their crews could hear whispers, voices speaking in languages that did not exist. "The creature knows we are here," Dr. Yunji reported, her voice tight with fear. "It is reacting to our presence." "Then let us give it something to react to," Taiwu said. "All ships, prepare for gravitational pulse." "On my command." The hollow began to fight back. It could not shoot weapons like a normal enemy. Instead, it changed the fabric of space itself. Gravity wells appeared out of nowhere, trying to crush the ships. Waves of darkness washed over the fleet, cutting off communication. The temperature dropped until frost formed on the inside of windows. The cargo ship Remembrance was the first to fall. A gravity well formed directly in front of a Korvani medical vessel, threatening to crush it. Captain Wujin of the Remembrance saw what was happening. He did not hesitate. He turned his ship directly into the path of the attack, using his vessel as a shield. The Remembrance crumpled like paper in a fist. There were no survivors. But the medical vessel escaped unharmed. "Remembrance is gone," Sujin reported, her voice breaking. "All hands lost." Taiwu gripped the armrest of his chair until his knuckles turned white. "They died heroes. Remember their names. Now keep moving." More attacks came. More ships fell. A mining vessel called Starlight was torn in half. A patrol boat named Honest Work vanished into a gravity well and never came out. A passenger liner that had volunteered its entire civilian crew was twisted until its engines exploded. And still, the fleet pressed forward. Lieutenant Jizu flew through the chaos, dodging gravity waves and darkness storms. Her co-pilot Hyam was silent beside her, focused entirely on keeping their ship alive. Around them, fighters exploded and broke apart. But Jisu kept flying. She had to. Too many people were counting on them. On the flagship, a support beam broke loose and struck Admiral Taiwu across the chest. He fell to the floor, blood spreading across his uniform. His crew rushed to help him, but he pushed them away. "I am fine," he said, though clearly he was not. "Focus on the mission." "How far to the target point?" 12 minutes, sir. But the ship has taken heavy damage. We may not hold together that long." Taiwu pulled himself back into his chair. His face was gray with pain, but his eyes were still sharp. "We will hold together. We have no choice." A young engineer named Hanyul worked frantically in the engine room of her ship, a small research vessel called Hope's Light. She had been watching the battle data, calculating possibilities. And she had found something. She called the bridge directly. "Captain, I have an idea. If we overload our reactor at the moment of the gravitational pulse, we can amplify the effect by 10 times. It could make the difference between hurting the hollow and driving it away completely. What happens to our ship if you do that? Haniel was quiet for a moment. The ship will be destroyed. Everyone on board will die. Before she could say anything else, 2 other ships called in. They had heard her transmission. They wanted to volunteer. "We will do it too," said Captain Mayray of the cargo vessel Last Chance. "Count us in," said Commander Ji-hoon of the military frigate Dawn's Edge. 3 ships. 3 crews. All of them willing to die to make the plan work. Taiwu listened to the volunteers, and for a moment, he could not speak. These were ordinary people. Workers and soldiers and scientists. They had families waiting for them at home. They had lives and dreams and futures. And they were giving all of it up to save strangers they had never met. "Approved," he said finally. "And thank you. Thank you all." The fleet reached the target point. Around them, the hollow screamed with rage, pressing inward, trying to crush them all. Ships were failing everywhere. The gravitational links between vessels flickered and snapped. Time was running out. "All ships," Taiwu announced, his voice strong despite his wounds. "Fire on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark." Every surviving ship fired their engines at the exact same moment. The gravitational pulse exploded outward, a wave of pure force that rippled through the hollow like a thunderclap. At the same instant, the 3 volunteer ships overloaded their reactors. They became miniature suns. The combined explosion amplified the pulse, beyond anything Dr. Yunji had calculated. The hollow shrieked, a sound that traveled through space itself, heard on worlds hundreds of light years away. The creature convulsed, twisting and writhing in agony, and then it ran. The hollow released the Kavani star and fled into the deep void, trailing darkness behind it like blood. The dying star flared back to life, burning bright and warm once more. The fleet had won, but the cost was terrible. When the final count was made, 1,109 ships had been destroyed. 847,000 humans and Kavani had died. Among the dead were Admiral Taiwu, who bled out from his wounds moments after the victory. Lieutenant Jisu, whose fighter was crushed in the final gravity surge. Haniel and all the crews of the volunteer ships, they were gone. But they had saved a world. On Velith Prime, the survivors looked up at their sky. For the first time in 200 years, their sun rose bright and warm. The ice began to melt. The darkness began to fade. The Carvani fell to their knees and wept. Not with sorrow, with joy, with gratitude, with the knowledge that they would live because strangers had died for them, just as their ancestors had once saved strangers, long ago. 3 months passed after the Battle of the Hollow. On Velith Prime, flowers bloomed for the first time in 2 centuries. Children played in fields of green grass, laughing under a warm sun. The Kavani people were rebuilding, and they were not doing it alone. Human engineers worked beside them, helping construct new cities. Human doctors treated the sick. Human teachers taught in the schools. The 2 species that had been connected by an ancient act of kindness were now connected by something deeper. But the battle had changed more than one world. It had changed the entire galaxy. On Axis Prime, the neutral capital of the Galactic Concord, representatives from 100 species gathered for an emergency meeting. The Great Hall was filled with beings of every shape and size. Elder races sat in their high chairs, looking down at everyone else as they had done for thousands of years. But something was different. Now, Councillor Doyen walked into the chamber with his head held high. Behind him came Grandmother Keth, the old Corvani woman who had lived long enough to see her people saved. They took their places at the center of the room, and for a long moment, nobody spoke. Ambassador Vurek of the Dominion broke the silence. His silver face was twisted with anger. This meeting is to discuss the consequences of humanity's reckless actions. They violated Concord warnings. They interfered with natural cosmic processes. They destabilized an entire star system. They saved a dying world, said a quiet voice. Everyone turned to look. The speaker was a small, furry being from a species called the Ven. They were minor members of the Concord, often ignored by the elder races. But this representative stood tall, her voice steady. For 200 years, the Corvani begged for help. We all knew they were dying. We all heard their signals. And we did nothing. She pointed at Varric. You did nothing. The elder races calculated the cost of saving them and decided it was too high. But the humans did not calculate. They just helped. Voices erupted across the chamber. Some were angry, but many were agreeing with the Ven representative. Species that had been silent for centuries were suddenly speaking. Forgotten worlds were finding their courage. Varric slammed his hand on his podium. Silence. The Concord's authority will be respected. Why? Asked another voice. This came from a representative of the Torok, a species of gentle giants who had been Concord members for 10,000 years. Why should we respect an authority that watches the innocent die and calls it wisdom? The humans have shown us another way. Perhaps it is time we learn from them. The chamber dissolved into chaos. Elder races argued with minor species. Ancient alliances cracked. The old order that had ruled the galaxy for millennia was breaking apart, and nothing could stop it. In the middle of the storm, Counselor Doyen simply stood and waited. When the noise finally died down, he spoke. We did not come here to destroy your Concord, he said calmly. We came here to repay a debt. That debt is now paid. What you do with your future is your own choice. But I hope you will remember what happened at Velith Prime. I hope you will remember that small species can do great things. I hope you will remember that kindness is not weakness. He paused and looked directly at Varric. And I hope you will remember that humanity never forgets a favor or an insult. The chamber was very quiet after that. When the meeting ended, everything was different. 17 species approached humanity with requests for alliance. The Corvani formally asked to join the human sphere as partners and equals. Even some elder races began to reconsider their old policies. The Dominion tried to blockade human space, but their own client species refused to follow orders. Ships that had served the elder races for generations now turned away from them. The galaxy was reshaping itself, and humanity stood at the center of the change. On Earth, a memorial was built for the fallen of Velith Prime. It stood in a quiet garden near the ocean, where the waves could sing to the dead. At its heart was a simple stone pillar, and carved into the stone were words chosen by the families of those who had died. They helped us when we were lost in the dark. We remembered. This is what it means to be human. People came from every human world to visit the memorial. They brought flowers and candles and photographs. They told stories about the friends and family they had lost. They cried and laughed and remembered. Grandmother Kath came too, traveling all the way from Velith Prime despite her fragile health. She stood before the memorial for a long time, her old eyes tracing the names carved into the stone. Then she knelt and touched the ground with her forehead, a gesture of deepest respect in Corvani culture. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for my people. Thank you for my world. We will carry your memory forever. Far away, in the empty space between galaxies, the wounded hollow drifted. It had fled from the light, from the terrible beings who had hurt it so badly. In its long existence, it had consumed thousands of stars. Thousands of species had watched their worlds die. None had ever tried to stop it. Until now. The hollow was ancient. It did not think like living creatures thought, but it remembered. And it wondered. It sent a message, broadcasting on frequencies that all species could hear. The message traveled across the galaxy, reaching every world, every ship, every being with ears to listen. I have fed on 1,000 worlds. 1,000 species have watched their stars die. None have ever come to stop me. Who are these creatures who sacrifice themselves for others? What are humans? On Axis Prime, the message was received in the Great Hall. The representatives fell silent as the Hollow's words echoed through the chamber. Counselor Doyum listened to the ancient creature's question. He thought about the people who had died at Velith Prime. He thought about Admiral Taiwu and Lieutenant Jisu and young Hanyul. He thought about all the ordinary humans who had flown into darkness to save strangers. Then he smiled, tired and sad but proud. That, he said softly, is the question you should have asked 200 years ago. He looked out through the great windows of the chamber, at the stars spreading across the endless void. Somewhere out there, the Hollow was waiting. Somewhere out there, other species were suffering. Other worlds were dying. Other calls for help were going unanswered. But now things were different. Now humanity was here, and they would remember every kindness ever shown to them. They would repay every debt. They would help the helpless and protect the weak, because that was what humans did. You asked what we are, Dayan said to the stars, to the watching galaxy, to the ancient creature hiding in the dark. You are going to find out. The story of Velith Prime spread to every corner of the galaxy. It was told in 100 languages, sung in 1,000 songs, carved into monuments on countless worlds. It became a legend, a promise, a warning. Humanity never overlooks a favor, and their repayment can shake worlds.